Welcome to another exciting episode of The View from Hampton U. Today's show will feature student perspectives, hosted by student leader Daquan Love, with guests Lawrence Rigby and Ray Sizemore.
Joining us on the show today, we have junior journalism and communications major Lawrence Rigby from Nassau, Bahamas, and freshman political science major Ray Sizemore from New Haven, Connecticut. So Lawrence, what do you think put McAuliffe over the finish line on election night?
I would have to say, Daquan, it had to do with the female vote. When you look at the voting bloc's percentages, the demographics, McAuliffe won 51% of female voters. And between the ages of 30 and 44, if I'm not mistaken, I think he captured about 48% of that particular demographic. So there's no doubt that the stark differences in opinion between the two candidates on women's rights put McAuliffe over the edge in terms of the female voting and winning the election.
Well, that's interesting to point out because Hampton University's own statewide likely voters poll indicated that Ken Cuccinelli had an edge over married women. What do you think about that, Ray?
Well, I think that the women in Virginia are not as the Democrats would like to point them out to be, that they're only women that want free abortion for all and don't have any sort of conservative views on anything. And I think that the fact that the Democrats tried to play them that way is what helped Cuccinelli win that block of people, of demographics that you mentioned. And the fact that Terry McAuliffe continued to try to play this race as Ken Cuccinelli hates women and hates the idea of abortion, and that's the only difference that they had, is what helped him win that demographic.
I think one of the mistakes we make is we confuse the values of people's values with their moral beliefs for the most part, and sometimes there's a difference between the two. If most females, there are some females who believe that, while they may have values and moral values about abortion rights and these other issues that come up face with women, they still believe that women should be given the choice, just be given the choice to make these decisions for themselves and independently of their moral convictions and their spiritual values. And so sometimes that gets blurred in both sides of the political divide.
I think you bring up a very interesting point. However, the Commonwealth of Virginia's gubernatorial election has been seen by many on the national spectrum as shining a spotlight on what the 2016 presidential election might look like. A referendum on some of the more liberal policies promoted by President Obama's administration. What do you think about that, Ray?
Well, I think that's a fair point. Virginia has become one of the battleground states of the nation, whereas maybe 8 or 10 years ago, it was one of the solid conservative states, and now somehow it's, over the course of time, it's become a more purple state, as they say. And I think that's it's always nice to look at one of the purple states to see how a presidential election might turn out across the country, and I think that's a fair point to say.
I think that's a very accurate point that Ray brings up. It has become more of a purple state. And so we see it's one of those battleground states that can go either which way, depending on the voter turnout in that particular state. Mm-hmm. So.
Ray, you indicated earlier that most of the races that Virginia Democrats have won have been fairly close. But as we know, on governor's race night here in Virginia on election night, the race for governor was called fairly early compared to that of the lieutenant governor as well as the attorney general. With only a 2.5% difference between the Republican and the Democrat. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I attribute that to Northern Virginia. Whenever the race is still close coming into the later hours of the night and Northern Virginia still hasn't been all counted, we all know that Northern Virginia is becoming very Democratic and a very blue area for Virginia. So if the race is still close by the late hours of the night when Northern Virginians' votes come in, then we can probably assume that Northern Virginia is going to push whatever Democrat is there over. So I think that's the reason why it was called so early, because it was still close when the Northern Virginia votes came in.
I think the reason why it was called early is simply because of the stark differences between Terry McAuliffe and Ken Cuccinelli in terms of their policies. And what you found was that a lot of Virginia voters felt as though Terry McAuliffe had the better plan for Virginia and going forward. And, you know, again, Ken Cuccinelli, his policies mostly affected women and their right to choose. And when you have women being one of the largest demographics in terms of the voting bloc, that would push any candidate over.
Ray, I see you shaking your head with regards to Lawrence talking about Ken Cuccinelli's policies on women, but I don't think Ken Cuccinelli ran his race primarily based on social women policies. What are your thoughts on that?
No, he didn't. And the fact that, I mentioned this earlier, the fact that the Democrats were trying to play it off as that was the only thing Ken Cuccinelli was running on is frankly false. It's not the only thing that he was running on. In fact, it was not the main thing or the second main thing he was running on. The main thing he was running on was jobs, he was running on education, and the fact that the Democrats are trying to play like this is some fringe Tea Party Republican that is only trying to get out there and bash women and take away all their rights. It's false. It's a bad play for the Democrats, and I don't appreciate that the Democrats are trying to skew it in that manner.
Thanks, Ray. We'll be right back with some more wonderful debate here on Student Perspectives with Lawrence and Ray as our special guests.
The Pen of Liberty is one of 3 identical pens used by President Abraham Lincoln to sign 3 proclamations that emancipated enslaved African Americans. A symbol of strength and tenacity, the pen is one of many remarkable objects now on display at the Hampton University Museum.
The View from Hampton U, bringing you in-depth interviews, cutting-edge research, amazing sports highlights, faculty and student profiles, and much more.
I'm Stephanie Sutton.
And I'm Joseph Walters.
And you're watching The View from Hampton U.
And now, more with Student Perspective.
Today I asked our all-star panelists this question. Why was there such a stark difference in the lieutenant governor's race?
In contrast to the gubernatorial race, I think that the Democrats put up a very good candidate in Ralph Northam. I've heard him speak a couple times, and I was sitting there thinking, I agree with nothing this man says, but it's just I feel like there's a connection there. He feels like a regular guy that's just trying to lead the state the way he believes the state needs to go. And I think that's just a great candidate that you put up, someone like Ralph Northam, as opposed to E.W. Jackson, who didn't lead a very mainstream campaign. He exposed some very questionable remarks on things like homosexuality, where he a lot of times and gun rights. Yeah, and where a lot of times he flat out said that homosexuality was wrong, and that was, I believe one time he said it was a cancer on society, and that's just not something you say if you're running for office. That's just something that's going to lose you a whole lot of votes, and whether you believe it's right or not, or whether you believe that's the truth or not, it's just not something you say if you're running for office, because you don't win that way, and that's why I think that's why there was such a stark difference in the race.
Lawrence, what was the difference between the two campaigns?
When you look at his opinions in the LGBT community, I think it's very offensive, even to conservative Americans who may disagree with their lifestyle choices. And so that would turn off any voter.
Okay, 5 seconds for each person. Was Bishop Jackson's homosexual remarks offensive, yes or no?
Yes.
Yes.
Why?
Because it's, whether you agree with gay marriage or gay adoption, things like that, the fact that you think that homosexuality is a cancer on society, that's just, no one is a cancer on society. No person can be a cancer on society. I mean, you can do things that you don't agree with, but that's how society works. That no one is exactly the same. There's always the differences in society, and the fact that he said that a specific group of people, just for the way they live, is a cancer on society, that's offensive. Even to me, as someone who's not homosexual, someone who personally doesn't believe in gay marriage, that's the fact that you say that they're a cancer on society. I can't stress enough that that's just not something that someone in their right mind should believe.
Do you think Bishop Jackson would have won the primary election if the Republicans did not select a convention versus a primary election?
No.
Why?
I think when you look at E.W. Jackson and his stances on these issues, I think what you see is an appeal to a conservative base. And that appeal to the conservative base pretty much is what hurt him, quite frankly, in a statewide election.
Your thoughts?
I'm going to agree. I don't think he would have won a primary. I think the Republican voters would have looked at this man and said, this man can't win a general election for the life of him. And they would have seen that this is not a viable candidate in any respect, and they would have not, nominated him.
Ken Cuccinelli seemed to distance himself, I believe, from Bishop Jackson, and maybe that had something to do with that difference there. Do you think it was smart for Ken Cuccinelli to do that, Lawrence?
Yes, it was very, very smart for Ken Cuccinelli to do that, and that's why he perhaps lost by so less of a margin in comparison to E.W. Jackson. Ken Cuccinelli understood that conservative Americans and Republicans, they did not identify with E.W. Jackson, and it would hurt his campaign to identify with someone that doesn't speak on behalf of the conservative base.
I'm going to agree. It was very smart of him to distance himself from him. I would have done the same thing if I was running for governor. I would not want to be tied with this man. I do not want to lose the votes that he lost, because he, like you said, he lost by near 11% of the vote.
And not to cut you off, Ray, but not only that. When you look at Ken Cuccinelli's campaign and Terry McAuliffe's campaign, both candidates understand that it's very important to appeal to independent voters. And you don't want to turn off independent voters with comments and things that are very, very divisive. There are, aside from the issue and ideologies, there are certain things that will turn on any voter, regardless of their ideology and their beliefs.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think Bishop E.W. Jackson's race played a part into why he lost the candidacy for lieutenant governor?
I don't believe so. I don't think E.W. Jackson's race had anything to do with it. I think like we've been saying this whole time, I think it was his comments, how he brought himself as a candidate. I think that's what lost him. If he was a viable candidate, if he said things that that people liked, then I think he would have won. I think he would, if he was the type of candidate that Ralph Northam was, that connected with you no matter what you were saying. Because like I said, I felt a connection with Ralph Northam, even though I disagreed with almost everything he said. So yeah, I don't think race had anything to do with it. I think it was his comments and how he portrayed himself as this fringe candidate that no one could agree with.
Do you think Virginia Republicans would be willing to elect a minority to represent their party, not just in the primary, but in the general election?
I don't see them having a problem with that. I mean, the whole state of Virginia has gone for Obama both times. If I remember correctly, Virginia went for Obama in the 2008 primaries. So I don't see any reason why Virginia cannot go with a statewide black candidate or a minority candidate.
You bring up an interesting point. It's interesting and important to note that every year since about the 1960s, when Virginia has voted for in the presidential election, and they have voted for, let's say, a Democrat, the next year in the governor's election, they would vote for the opposite party. Terry McAuliffe was able to stop that tradition for that was almost a 45-year-old tradition in Virginia by Virginia electing in 2012 President Obama, and in this gubernatorial election, Governor-elect Terry McAuliffe, both from the same party. That's very interesting. How did Terry McAuliffe change that tradition and change that pattern in Virginia?
I think Terry McAuliffe did a very good job. He had a great backing when President Clinton came down and supported him. And I think it resonated with Virginia voters of the Clinton years. And that helped Terry McAuliffe in his campaign. And again, it goes back, I think, women's rights and the issue of the role of women and their rights played a huge difference. We may think there are other issues that perhaps were just as big, but I think women's rights, again, played a huge role in putting McAuliffe over the edge.
You mentioned President Clinton and their connection between the two. I don't see Terry McAuliffe as anything like Bill Clinton. I have great respect for Bill Clinton. I thought he was a great president, and I don't think Terry McAuliffe is anything like Bill Clinton.
Why not? Why isn't? What are the differences between the two? Because Terry McAuliffe was at one point a manager for Bill Clinton in his campaign and was very helpful in Hillary Clinton's unsuccessful 2008 bid for the White House. So what are the differences between the Clintons and McAuliffe?
I think I mentioned this with Ralph Northam. Bill Clinton is just someone you can really easily connect to. But Bill Clinton's famous line, "I feel your pain." It's just someone. Bill Clinton is just someone that you feel like he understands you. You feel like he knows what you're saying and that he's doing his best to work for you. I think that contrastly, Terry McAuliffe is what they call him a career politician. They're just looking out for he's a political opportunist. I heard that Terry McAuliffe, before running for governor of Virginia, was considering running for governor of New York or Florida or wherever he thought he could get elected. And I think that the fact that he's this political opportunist that's just looking to advance his career, it's not what Bill Clinton was. Bill Clinton was like. He was, like I said, he was I feel your pain. I want to help you out. I'm here for you. Whereas Terry McAuliffe is, I'm here for your vote. It's pointless to campaign against him now, but I just feel like pointing out that difference is important.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Lawrence and Ray, for being here on the show. This has been another dynamic segment of Student Perspectives. We'll look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.
When I found out that I had prostate cancer, I thought it was the end of the world. My wife broke down and cried.
The Hampton University Proton Therapy Institute is treating prostate, breast, lung, pediatric, brain, and other cancers with the most precise form of radiation treatment available.
Proton therapy made it a wonderful life. It really did.
If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with cancer, call the Proton Therapy Institute at 877-251-6838.
Great day to be alive.
The Pen of Liberty is one of 3 identical pens used by President Abraham Lincoln to sign 3 proclamations that emancipated enslaved African Americans. A symbol of strength and tenacity, the pen is one of many remarkable objects now on display at the Hampton University Museum.
Next up, faculty and student profiles from Hampton University's finest.
I'm April Woodard, Assistant Professor at Hampton University in the Scripps Howard School of Communications. I actually grew up in Hampton Roads on a college campus not far from here at Norfolk State University, where my dad was president for 22 years. My first job was at WTKR right in Norfolk, Virginia, and from there I went to Seattle, and from there I went to New York, working for Inside Edition. So I've had a pretty quick path, but a very interesting one. I stayed at Inside Edition for about 14 years and then transitioned out of doing that full time to freelance and began hosting for BET and BET International. One of the most memorable interviews was with Dr. Maya Angelou, and I had met her on several occasions. And so this particular time I was going to her house in Winston-Salem, and it was just an intimate portrait. I mean, you don't always get to see where these people live, and I got a chance to look at some of her pictures of her and Oprah and all kinds of things. And just, it's a type of lady who you really just sit at her feet and just listen, and you're like this, leaning in for every single word that comes out of her mouth. And I distinctly remember I was taking a picture, and you know how you lean in when you take a picture, and she says, "April, stand upright, lean on no man, and bow down only to God." And I was like, oh, okay, so now, I take a picture like this straight up because I remember what Dr. Angelou said. Of course, I got inspiration to write children's books for my children. I wanted to see and have books that they could have in their hands and look at home and read at home that had images of them in it. And my best friend and I, Davita, Dr. D, that I've known since first grade, decided to write a children's book that was dedicated to our mothers. My mother's Lucy, her mother's Frankie, and it's the adventures of Frankie and Lucy. And it's really some real stories that have happened to us as children growing up in theater and in arts and going to Catholic schools. And that's what the series of books is about. I think HU has a great way of preparing students for the future, particularly at Scripps, because this is where I spend a majority of my time. You have real life individuals who have been out in the field who can explain and prepare them. One of the things that I didn't get as a college student was someone explaining to me how to act out in the field, because you only know based on what you see and based on experience, really. And so I think that I can offer these students a different perspective because I have such a range of stories. How to respond in a 9/11 situation, or how did I respond in a 9/11 situation, and the difference between me handling 9/11 and handling hurricanes when I was here in this area, or handling the issues out in Seattle. So I can really give them a perspective on what's expected of you and how you should handle yourself in front of other people in a professional manner.
Hi, my name is Josh Gopeesingh. I'm a fourth-year chemical engineer major from Trinidad and Tobago. I always had an interest in chemical engineering because I was generally interested in science from a really young age. Hampton University in particular, what really attracted me was that it was next to the ocean and the really good sailing program. Water for me connects every landmass, so when I'm out sailing, I just imagine myself connected back home as well. Well, apart from being a member of the sailing team, I'm also a member of the American Institute of Chemical Engineers. This year I was nominated by the Dean for 2 Black Engineer of the Year awards, one for being a research scientist and another for being a scholar athlete. With being captain of the sailing team, I find a balance mainly using discipline and good time organization. I try to keep a planner to keep myself organized and constantly on schedule. I learned about being a finalist for the Rhodes Scholarship at around 10 p.m. on a Friday night. I guess you can say I was getting ready to go out and just seeing the email on my phone. I was completely lost for words. I think I had to read it a few more times. Learning that I was named as a finalist, a Rhodes Scholar, it was one of the most amazing moments of my life. I think the first thing I did was call my parents, and it was just a really good time for me. Hampton has definitely allowed me to excel professionally, one, because the program is widely recognized. Throughout the summers, I've been able to intern at Massachusetts Institute of Technology and Syracuse University. I was recognized by the Rhodes Committee to be a finalist. And personally, I think at Hampton, it's a really big family. When I was chosen to be a finalist, it was really amazing to see every department and every person who I've met over the past 2 years just all come together to try and help me reach my goal. Just being along the journey of being a Rhodes finalist, it was really amazing to have to learn about previous finalists and also winners like Bill Clinton and many other people that came before me. My future plans following graduation from Hampton University is to attend graduate school and hopefully pursue my PhD in chemical engineering.
Proton therapy was much easier than what I was expecting. I thought surely I would have some side effects.
The Hampton University Proton Therapy Institute is treating prostate, breast, lung, pediatric, brain, and other cancers with the most precise form of radiation treatment available.
And I had no side effects whatsoever. So it was the best decision I ever made.
If you or a loved one has been diagnosed with cancer, call the Hampton University Proton Therapy Institute today.
Join us next week for another exciting episode of The View from Hampton U.